All right, so Richard Wolff, the guy I've talked about several times before, he's one of the leading Marxists in the U.S. today. He was on the Hill recently talking about the dire state of our economy, and it's odd. It's something you might notice with some of the more prominent, more well-spoken Marxists, as opposed to the ones lighting businesses on fire. But you might notice when listening to Richard Wolff, he actually says a lot of things that a typical free marketer can agree with. Even in the past, he spoke about the tariffs we were putting on China, and he said those hurt both U.S. citizens and Chinese citizens, which there is certainly truth in that. China won't be producing as much. It hurts their economic activity. It hurts the Chinese citizen. And we will be paying higher prices for consumer goods, which you started seeing in the U.S. as well, which is a fair point by Richard Wolff. But when he was on the show recently, he actually brought something up that I had criticized him in the past for avoiding so much, which of course is the Federal Reserve. He does the Marxist trick where he blames free markets for wealth disparity, and then he conveniently leaves out the biggest cause for wealth disparity, that of course being the Federal Reserve. Well, recently he was right on the money with the Fed. I was actually impressed. In this segment, he points out that the Federal Reserve is printing up an ungodly amount of money, and then he asks, where is it going? Is it going to the small business on the corner? Of course not. It's making its way into the stock market. And the politically connected, get to use it, and this bids up all the prices of these financial instruments, and the more rich and politically connected make out like bandits, while most people who might not even have a portfolio, they get left in the dust. And then, of course, the Cantillon effect, where money is created out of thin air. Those who are wealthy and connected are first in line to use that money through the credit markets. Then after the money circulates through the economy and it loses its purchasing power, it finds its way into the hands of the middle or lower class. And by that time, its value has been diminished substantially, and voila, you've made wealth disparity worse. So two things I want to point out. One is whether or not Richard Wolff is aware that the person whose namesake he identifies himself with, that being Karl Marx, is he aware that Marx advocated for something very similar to the Federal Reserve? It's not identical, as Marx advocated for centralization of credit into the hands of the state, where we have centralization of credit into private hands only made possible by the state, which turns those private hands into de facto hands of the state anyway. I wonder, honestly, if he realizes that the very things causing almost all of our problems that he himself pointed out as a problem were advocated for by his hero. The other thing that I would sincerely like to hear Richard Wolff and other Marxists speak on, and I'm being genuine, I'd really be interested in hearing from them on this, is whether or not they realize that whether it's tariffs, the Federal Reserve, corporate welfare, or corporate bailouts, do they realize that those things are precisely what true free market advocates have been condemning for quite some time now? I wonder if they realize that they are in fact on the exact same page as free market supporting libertarians. It's just that we recognize the common denominator within all of these things being government, and that's where the root of the problem lies. Whereas Marxists, although they claim they oppose government, they very often support groups that engage in activities that are open for criticism precisely because they behave how governments behave, and that is that they engage in the initiation of force. And not for nothing, Marxists and socialists will often point out that their ideology, in the textbook sense, does not advocate for an expansive, overbearing government. And that is true in a textbook sense, depending on which socialist you're listening to, of course. But then you will see those same self-avowed Marxists or socialists calling for a substantial increase in government power and influence, and that the government should be providing everything under the sun. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So it's odd because I can listen to someone like Richard Wolff and be in full agreement about a problem that affects everyone living in the United States, a problem that he points out. But the thing I would be pointing out is that, again, government is the root cause of the problem, and it isn't even theoretical, by the way. The government itself wrote down, scribed into law, their precise implementation of these problems. So it's one of those things where I agree with many problems that socialists and Marxists bring up, but their solutions are terrible and would only exacerbate those problems. If you want to complain about certain corporations and big businesses, that's fine. Or the Federal Reserve, I'm right there with you. But all you need to do is get government in line, and you've just flicked off the life support for many of those large, politically connected institutions. You've just started down the road towards a real recovery. No bloody revolution is necessary where small or medium-sized business owners that employ wage earners are executed for being some sort of a wage slave owner. You don't have to do that. If the recent protests, for example, were as relentless but geared towards the Federal Reserve and the unfair advantage given to large corporations by the government, if you actually had protests addressing that and a large educated populace on that topic, then you've actually got a shot at fixing things. But when you call for more government, you only empower the same people who are causing the problems, which you correctly pointed out. But oddly enough, the supposed solution you advocate for would only, as I said, exacerbate those very problems. But that is all for now. Like, subscribe, share this video, and take it easy.